everybody. My name is Bill Doherty. I'm the CEO of the Walton Group of Companies. Walton is a real estate land asset management company with a little over $3.5 billion of assets under management, with land located in Alberta and Ontario and Canada and throughout the southern smile of the United States. We're very fortunate today to have a very special guest with us, Dr. Lawrence Yun. Dr. Yun is the chief economist for the National Association of Realtors and oversees their research group. He creates forecasts and participates in many economic forecast panels and groups nationally. Among them are the Blue Chip Council and the Wall Street Journal Forecasting Survey. Lawrence has appeared regularly on financial news outlets and really is an expert in his field, and we're very fortunate to have him joining us today. How are you doing, Lawrence?
Hello, Bill. Thank you for inviting.
Thank you. Well, Lawrence, there's been a lot of interesting activity in the residential real estate market over the last 4 or 5 months. A lot of uncertainty and a lot of headwinds. Really, this is all precipitated as a result of what's happening with inflation and how the Fed is dealing with that. The Fed has been very aggressive in increasing rates over the last number of months. And from your perspective, is the Fed going too fast? Or do you think the Fed has to go further still with the one tool that they have in order to deal with inflation?
So the Federal Reserve is clearly behind the curve. Throughout last year, they have been indicating that it will be transitory, or I should say that, even the statement coming out of the White House that it was non-issue. Don't worry about it. Well, it is an issue, and now consequently, they are fast raising interest rate to compensate for that delay. And I'm not sure if they are done. I think there will be another big rate hike in November and possibly another one in early 2023. Now, having said that, the Federal Reserve only controls something called Fed funds rate, the short-term interest rate, what the banks borrow among themselves, and not the mortgage rates for the consumers. The mortgage rates are determined by the long-term bond, and I think it already priced in what the Fed will be doing in the future. So I'm hoping that the 7% mortgage rate, right about there of today's rate, will be the new normal. Possibly it could retreat somewhat if the inflation number in the upcoming months show a great improvement, meaning low inflation. But I think the 7% mortgage rate could be the new normal.
And when you say the new normal, do you have any idea or projection of how long those rates are going to be at rates that I've seen before in my lifetime, and so have you, sir, but this younger generation has never experienced this. When you say the new normal, is that out for a number of years from your perspective?
I think it could be for a couple of years. And then if the inflation really begins to go back to the normal 2-3% rate, then mortgage rate will begin to dip again, maybe down to 6% or even 5.5%. But for at least through 2023, 7% could be the normal. Let me also add just one additional risk factor. There's something called technical analysis among the bond traders. And right now we are bumping up against something called resistance. Now, usually when it hits the resistance, it tends to hold or retreat. But if it bursts through, we could possibly look at 8.5% mortgage rate. So there is some chance that we may see 8.5%, but most likely 7% will be the holding point and the new normal, at least for the next 18 months, 24 months.
Well, let's hope you're correct on that one, Lawrence. As it relates to inflation, when do you think we're going to start seeing decreases in year-to-year inflation, particularly with the core inflation rate?
The core inflation rate is rising and even showing some accelerating sign, principally because of the rising rents. We have a housing shortage. People who want to buy or sell, real estate investor, not enough property to choose from. So we know about housing shortage, but there's also apartment occupancy availability that is just simply not there. Consequently, the rents are rising strongly, and that is why core inflation is also rising. The private sector data on apartment, not the official government data, is showing that apartment rent appreciation appeared to have peaked. It's coming down somewhat. So maybe the government data is a little lagging indicator. So once the rent begins to show slower growth, I mean, it's not going to decline. It's just a matter of, is it rising 8% and then rising to 7%. So as long as it begins to show decelerating sign, I think this is when the Federal Reserve will take a deep sigh of relief and say, okay, maybe we can stop raising rates, and maybe even into the future, say towards end of 2023, maybe consider even lowering interest rate at a time when economy is very shaky at the moment.
As it relates to the mortgage rates, it's almost as though there's a perfect storm that's happening right now. Because if people are in their current home and they were thinking of moving, they're probably not going to move now, are they? They're probably going to stay where they're at with a lower rate. And this is going to decline contract the amount of houses that are on MLS. And it's going to have an impact on houses that are being rented out. And so those pressures are all coming to bear at this point in time. But is that the case from your perspective?
You are absolutely right, Bill, because, the people who would normally move because of changing life circumstances, new job, maybe additional child in the family.
Right.
There's always some divorces, death in the family, estate sale and such. But people who are locked in at 3% say, no, I don't want to give this up. I wish I had a larger size home, but I love my 3% rate more than a larger size home. So many people are not listing. In fact, we see it in the data. Overall active listing is actually higher now compared to last year. I mean, last year was extremely tight, but even with this increase, it is well below pre-pandemic 2019 levels. But the new information, new listing, those fresh listings that's popping out is actually lower compared to last year. So new listings are not popping, but overall inventory is rising somewhat because those listings are lingering in the marketplace for a much longer period.
Right. Well, the headlines out there, even this morning, are saying that, new listings for homes and price cuts in the listing of homes are at or near a record pace in some regions. But are those numbers misleading when you think about the acceleration and escalation in pricing of homes, particularly in the last 2.5 years? As a result of COVID and people moving away from the big cities and going out to the suburbs. So isn't there, in most cases, a long way to come down to where they were normalized, if you will, in March 2020?
First thing to consider is, there are large headlines to say even prices could buckle. Is it a repeat of 2008, 30% price crash and such thing? For me, it's nonsense. And the reasoning is a couple of reasons. First is we don't have those funny, risky mortgages where it was just given even without income documentation, the fast changing adjustable rate change, all that part, which simply imploded, 12 years ago. We don't have those mortgages. And that's a good thing. But the other reason is what we just discussed, inventory. Back then, we had inventory soaring. So inventory levels were actually 4 times higher than what it is today. And we just talked about fewer new listings coming onto the market. So simple economics, supply and demand is implying that prices simply cannot collapse 30%. Could prices go down 5%? Maybe. But could prices rise 5%? Maybe. It could go either way. I think there would be some regional variation. California market is more susceptible to decline just because it's expensive and mortgage rates are really eating into that monthly payment. So California declining 10% in prices is a good probability, but home prices in the South and the Midwest, I think it will hold on reasonably well. Now, Canadians, Canada is a little different. They've seen a faster price growth than the U.S., and also there's more prevalence of a shorter term mortgages, not the 30-year rate in the U.S. So if anything, Canada is somewhat vulnerable, but definitely not the price crash. It will be some plus -5 or in the single digit percentage.
Right. Well, that's a great segue. At Walton, we deal with a number of the national builders across the country, where we finance, in essence, the land that they use to develop and build their homes and sell to out into the marketplace. And of course, we're on the phone with divisional presidents and the C-suite executives nearly on a daily basis, and they don't seem panicked. They're not retrading deals aggressively, and their outlook is really that of a wait and see. From your perspective, what do you see happening in multifamily and single family for the next 2 to 3 quarters?
Let's go back to pre-COVID, say March 2020. So all the discussion was about housing shortage. And in fact, our analysis showed that there's probably a 5 million unit shortage in America based on population growth that occurred and how many new home construction that was built. And what we are finding is there was a housing shortage, apartment shortage, housing shortage. We saw the impact of that shortage in 2020 and 2021 with prices rising so fast. But now home sales are coming down. So in a sense, the housing market is adjusting, but we still have inventory shortage. For the builders, interestingly, they're seeing increased cancellation on those lots and also those homes that is not yet finished. So just shoveling through in the midst of a construction. People thought they could buy at 3% rate, but now they cannot get a mortgage at 7%. So there is a cancellation. But once home is completed, the garage door arrive on time, the refrigerator in place. Once home is ready to go, even with some price discount, home builders are making profit and they are selling it at quite briskly. So it's not lingering in the market for a long period. So given this environment, I would say the builders are, it's right to be cautious a bit, but at the same time, let's remember the underlying issue, housing shortage. And way to relieve housing shortage is to build more. And once home is completed, it appears there are buyers and also apartment vacancy rate running historically low levels.
And would it be fair to conclude that even though the cost of a mortgage has increased, it's more than doubled in the last 12 months, there is a silver lining that with supply chain getting more and more normalized every single week, every single month, and with the slowdown in new home starts, that the cost of labor, the cost of the goods to build the homes, and the delivery times is going to bring down the cost of homes and bring affordability back into the marketplace. Is that a fair conclusion?
Yeah, that would be more efficient process. So, when you have a delay in production, supply chain issues, one is carrying that inventory for a longer period, and that's costly because the lenders who provided the construction loan is saying, I don't care whether it's a delay, you still owe me the interest every month. So the fact that the whole operation is becoming more efficient means that consumers will be able to get a little more cheaper price and the builders to still make a good profit margin from it. So it's a very good development that the supply chain issue is pretty much largely over and done with. Lumber prices back to pre-COVID days. So, things are looking, much better now compared to the issues that builders face, say, 1 years ago.
Okay. And Lawrence, I'm going to round it out with the state of the general economy here in the United States. By definition, the United States is technically in a recession. Do you believe it doesn't feel like we're in a recession because of the low unemployment rate, the number of jobs that are being added on a month-to-month basis, and generally the economy seems to be going along pretty well, notwithstanding what's going on in the residential home market. Do you believe we're in a recession? And if you don't believe that, do you believe we're going to enter one shortly? And if so, how long do you think the recession will last?
So we are in a bizarre situation because we had a 2 straight quarters of GDP decline, which by textbook would say we are in a recession. But those declines are very, very mild. I mean, just say slightly below zero. So it's a very mild number. But at the same time, we have a labor shortage, more job openings, more help wanted sign that people are searching for job by a ratio of almost 2 to 1. I think the latest was 1.7 to 1. But still, for an unemployed person to have that options is great. Now, of course, not every job is a perfect match. Recent mortgage broker who got laid off, they're not interested in working at 7-Eleven. So you will take some time to get that suitable job. But the labor shortage, you look at the airline industry, you look at the industry like the hotel, restaurant, help wanted sign everywhere. The nursing homes, they want to hire truck driver, delivery. So there's a labor shortage. So quite an unusual circumstance. But at the same time, you look at the stock market or people look at their retirement fund and it's diminished. So something is not right. So it is a somewhat of a bizarre situation. I would say one big uncertainty going forward is really about European recession this winter because of the war in Ukraine, all this gas delivery to Germany. They may have to shut down the factory, in some days. So it will be very interesting. Europe will go into recession. They have less income to buy American products. So you will have some impact, residual impact to the U.S. economy as well.
Okay. Well, Lawrence, sir, it's a pleasure to meet you in person. I've followed you for a number of years. You've made sense of all these headlines that are out there in the marketplace right now. And I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Great. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence.